My name is Callie Ford and I just turned 20 years old. At my birthday party last night, my dad pulled me into the hallway and said real quiet, "When this is over, you're going to sign some papers for your Uncle Nate. Just a formality." I smiled. I nodded. Then I walked into the kitchen, opened my laptop and moved everything. My grandparents left me into a trust that nobody could touch. Not my dad. Not my uncle. Not anyone. By sunrise, my father was going to try to prove that my grandfather wrote a will that never existed. A will with his signature on it. A will he never wrote in his life. Before I tell you how that morning went, hit like and subscribe. Tell me what city you're watching from. I always like knowing where you all are. Now let me take you back. Because none of this makes sense until you understand a lake, a cabin, and two people who loved me more than they ever said out loud. I was 12 the summer my grandfather first drove me out to Lantern Lake in his old blue truck. The cabin sat back in the pine trees right on the water. The porch leaned a little to one side. The screen door never shut right. It smelled like wood smoke and old paperback books and something sweet I could never quite name. "Grab the other end," Grandpa Arthur said, lifting a fence rail. I grabbed it. We spent the whole morning fixing posts. He never rushed me. He taught me how to press my thumb into the wood, to check if it was rotten. "If it gives in," he said, "it's done." Inside, my Grandma Ruth had sandwiches waiting on a table Grandpa built with his own hands. That night we sat on the porch and watched the lake turn gold. "This cabin stays in the family," Grandpa told me quietly. "But family isn't always blood, Callie. Family is whoever shows up." I was 12. I thought he was just talking. He wasn't. After that summer I came out to Lantern Lake almost every weekend. Grandpa taught me how to patch a roof and fix a leak. Grandma taught me how to sort her books by color because she said it made the room feel warmer. It felt like they were handing me pieces of a secret one at a time. Back home things were different. Our house in Hollis Creek was fine. Not warm. Just fine. My little sister Josie had the big bedroom with the new furniture. My room still had the old carpet from the people who lived there before us. One night at dinner my dad brought up the cabin. "That place is losing value," he said, cutting his steak. "We should sell it and put the money somewhere better." My mom nodded. "Makes sense." "Grandpa said the cabin stays in the family," I said. My dad laughed. Not a mean laugh. Just the kind that means he thought I was being cute. "We're 12, Callie." He was just being nice. Then he moved on to Josie's science fair ribbon. Nobody asked about the essay contest I'd won 2 weeks before. After dinner I saw a shiny flyer on the kitchen counter. Northgate Realty Group. Lakefront lots, top dollar. Someone had written a phone number on the side in pen. Someone was already looking at my grandparents' home and seeing dollar signs. 2 years later, Grandpa Arthur died. I was 14. At the funeral, I saw my dad and my Uncle Nate standing near the food table with a folder between them. "We should move on this before things get complicated," Uncle Nate whispered. They were talking about selling the cabin at my grandfather's funeral. I was only 14. I stayed quiet. I had no idea Grandpa had already gotten ahead of them. 2 more years passed. My Grandma Ruth got sick that spring and died that summer. The last time I saw her, she squeezed my hand so tight it almost hurt. "The cabin is yours, Callie," she whispered. "Don't let them take it." "I promise," I said. She closed her eyes. After her funeral, my dad sat at our kitchen table looking almost relieved. "Now we can finally sort out the property," he said. That night I heard him in the garage with Uncle Nate. "Let's get this moving," my dad said. I stood in the hallway holding a glass of water, and I understood something awful. Losing my grandma felt like losing the whole world to me. To them it felt like an opportunity. One didn't cry that night. I made a decision instead. From 16 to 20, the cabin became my quiet rebellion. Every Saturday I drove out to Lantern Lake in the old car I bought with babysitting money. I fixed the screens. I swept pine needles off the roof. I patched the weather stripping. At home the words started changing. Nobody called it Grandpa's place anymore. Now it was the family property. Uncle Nate started showing up more. Sometimes he brought folders. Sometimes he brought real estate papers. One night I finally said something out loud. Grandma wanted me to keep it. My mom set down her fork gently. Your grandma got emotional near the end, honey. This is business. Business. That word became their answer to everything. By the time I was 19, my dad had gotten more direct. When you turn 20, he told me, we'll settle this as a family. But the way he said family made my stomach twist. One afternoon at the cabin, I found an envelope tucked behind some old quilts in the closet. My name was written on the front in my grandma's handwriting. Inside was a business card. Nadia Cross, attorney at law. Underneath her name for small words, Ford Family Trust. My hands were shaking. My grandma had hidden this for me to find. 3 months before my 20th birthday, Nadia Cross called me herself. I need to speak with you before your birthday, she said carefully. That Saturday I met her downtown. Her office smelled like coffee and old paper. She opened a folder and looked right at me. Your grandparents set up an irrevocable trust 6 years ago, she said. The cabin, their savings, some investments. All together a little over $2 million. You are the sole beneficiary. The room felt like it tilted sideways. The cabin has belonged to that trust for years, she went on. Your father and your uncle have no legal claim to it at all. Why didn't anyone tell my dad? Nadia paused. Your grandfather told me something I've never forgotten. He said his sons would try to sell that cabin before the funeral flowers even wilted. She hesitated before adding one more thing. There's something else you should know. Someone has recently been asking about your grandfather's will. The original one. After that meeting, I started paying much closer attention. One Sunday, Uncle Nate came over for dinner. Afterward, he and my dad went out to the garage. I stood near the cracked door and listened. We don't need the trust, Uncle Nate said low. Not if there's a later will. A will beats a trust if it's the last thing he signed. People contest trusts on incapacity all the time. My chest went tight. You'd need proof he actually wrote one, my dad said. I can get proof, Uncle Nate said. I stepped back from that door with ice in my hands. My uncle wasn't planning to fight fair. He was planning to build something out of nothing. That night I texted Nadia. They're planning something with a fake will. Her reply came fast. I was afraid of that. The next Saturday, Nadia explained everything calmly. Even if someone produces a later will, it does not touch the trust, she said. A trust holds property outside of probate. It doesn't matter what a will says, real or fake. But if they try to use a forged document, that's not just a bad legal argument anymore. That's a crime. What happens the moment I turn 20? You become the trust's legal successor, she said. I'll file the paperwork with the county the same morning. After that it's locked. Permanently. Should I tell my parents now? Nadia took off her glasses slowly. Your grandfather asked me to protect you, not negotiate with them. 9 days before my birthday, my dad announced he was throwing me a big party. You only turn 20 once, he said, smiling. I smiled back. But I already knew the truth. My dad was planning my birthday. My uncle was planning to fake my grandfather's handwriting. and I was quietly waiting for both of them to walk straight into something my grandparents had built years before either of them thought to try. 5 days before my birthday, my mom sat next to me on the couch. "Now that you're almost 20, she started softly, "we should make some decisions together as a family." Together. The word felt hollow. "The cabin costs money," she said. "Taxes, repairs. If we sell it, we can help you and Josie both." "Grandma wanted me to keep it," I said. My mom's patience cracked just for a second. "Sentiment doesn't pay bills, Callie." My dad walked in right on cue. "I've already got a buyer interested," he said proudly. "Which company?" "Northgate, I think." "Already knew that." "I'll think about it," I said. "That's my girl," my dad said. Later that night, my little sister Josie came into my room. "Mom and Dad keep talking about the cabin after they think I'm asleep," she whispered. "They sound excited. Is something going on?" "Don't worry about it," I told her, tucking the blanket around her feet. She still looked worried. 3 days before my birthday, Uncle Nate stopped me in the driveway, smiling like he was selling me a car. "That land alone is worth real money," he said. "Say yes and you still walk away with plenty for school." His smile got tighter. "You're young, Callie. This is more money than you think." "Whose name is actually on that property?" "Your grandparents. But they're gone now." "That's not how any of this works." For 1 second his face changed completely. Then the smile came right back. "Don't overthink it," he said and got in his car. He was already calling someone before he'd even pulled out of the driveway. I knew exactly who. The night before my birthday, I drove out to the cabin alone. The lake was dark and quiet. In Grandpa's old porch chair and opened every document Nadia had sent me. I read each page twice. Grandpa once told me that patience wasn't weakness. "It's timing," he said. I finally understood what he meant. I cried a little, but not because I was weak. Because I wished things were different. I wished my dad had cared more about fishing trips than property values. I wished my mom had once asked what I actually wanted. But wishes don't win legal fights. Paperwork does. I went home and set my alarm for 11:45 that night. At midnight I would turn 20. At midnight, everything would change. The house was silent. I joined a video call with Nadia. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready." The clock hit midnight. I signed the papers. Just like that, I became the official beneficiary of the Ford Family Trust. "At 8 a.m. tomorrow," Nadia said, "I'll file the final notice with the county. Once that's recorded, nothing your father or your uncle brings forward will matter. Not even a will, real or fake." Downstairs, my whole family slept peacefully. They had no idea Uncle Nate's plan was already dead before he'd even finished building it. That same night in his apartment, Uncle Nate sat at his desk with a pen and an old blank sheet of stationery he'd found somewhere in Grandpa's old files years back. He'd been practicing Grandpa's handwriting for weeks off of old birthday cards. He wrote out a short 1-page will. Dated it 2 weeks before Grandpa died. Signed Grandpa's name at the bottom and forged a signature line for a witness who didn't exist. He called my dad close to midnight. "It's ready," he said. "We'll show it to her tomorrow at the party. Simple and clean." "You're sure this holds up?" my dad asked. "A will beats a trust," Uncle Nate said. "Everybody knows that." Nobody in that garage understood trust law. And by morning they were both going to learn the hard way. My birthday party started at 4 the next afternoon. The backyard was full of neighbors and family and string lights. There was cake. There were balloons. I smiled and opened gifts, and in my jacket pocket was a single folded page that had already changed everything. whether anyone in that yard knew it yet or not. My dad stood up with his glass raised. "Callie's officially an adult today," he said, beaming at the crowd. "And our family has some exciting news to share." He looked right at me. "Right, Callie?" Every face turned toward me. "Thanks, Dad," I said, and nothing else. Later, my neighbor from out at the lake, Mrs. Doyle, pulled me aside quietly. "I saw your uncle out at the cabin last week," she whispered. "Two men in suits measuring the land. He was showing it to buyers before he even owned a single board of it." After the cake, my dad stood again. "Our family's been through a lot," he announced to the whole yard. "But my parents left us something valuable. The cabin at Lantern Lake." The yard went quiet. "As a family, we've decided to sell it." "We've decided," I repeated softly. My dad smiled at me. "Callie understands this is best for everyone." I set my fork down. "I never agreed to sell that cabin." His smile froze. "She's kidding," he laughed a little too loud. "I'm not." Uncle Nate stepped forward, reaching into his jacket. "Actually, there's something you should see," he said, and pulled out a folded page. "Your grandfather wrote a new will, Callie. 2 weeks before he passed. He wanted the cabin split between your dad and me. I only just found it going through his old files." He set it down on the table in front of everyone like he was laying down a winning card. I looked at it. I looked at him. "That's interesting," I said. "Bez, I have something for you, too." I pulled out my own folded page. 6 years ago, my grandparents put the cabin, their savings, and their investments into an irrevocable trust. I became the legal beneficiary at midnight last night. My lawyer files the final notice with the county in the morning. I paused. A trust isn't part of an estate. It doesn't matter what a will says, real or otherwise. The yard went dead silent. My dad's face went pale. Uncle Nate's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. "That's not possible," my dad said quietly. "It's very possible," I said. "It's been true for 6 years. You just never asked." Once the guests had gone home, my mom turned on me. "Do you understand what you just did? Your father could lose everything, and you're up there waving papers around like a lawyer." "I know about the will Uncle Nate wrote," I said. "The real question is whether either of you knew he wrote it himself." My mom's mouth opened, then closed. The next morning at 8 a.m., Nadia cross-filed the final notice at the county office. From that moment on, the trust was locked. Permanently. Nobody could sell the cabin, will or no will. At 9 that morning, my dad called Nadia's office directly, asking about the will Uncle Nate had found. Nadia had already sent it to a document examiner overnight, the same one she'd used on cases like this for 20 years. By that afternoon, she called me. The paper stock wasn't manufactured until 4 years after your grandfather died, she said. The ink is a type that didn't exist until after that too. And the witness listed on the will has never lived at that address. It's not close, Callie. It's not even a good forgery. My uncle hadn't just told a lie. He'd built a crime out of paper and old birthday cards. My dad came by that evening, looking years older than he had the day before. "The bank's already circling the store," he admitted. "Nate swore this would work." "I'm sorry about the store," I said. "But the cabin was never yours to sell. And that will was never Grandpa's to write." He didn't argue. For the first time in my whole life, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't anger. It was defeat. 2 days later, Uncle Nate called the house. His real estate broker's license was already under review. Northgate's lawyers were asking questions of their own, since he'd shown a property to buyers using a document that turned out to be fake. "I need my own lawyer now," he told my dad. "So do I," my dad said and hung up first. Over the next few weeks, everything came apart slowly. The county opened a fraud investigation into the will. Uncle Nate lost his license entirely. People around town started talking not because I told anyone but because court paperwork is public record. Everyone in Hollis Creek eventually heard some version of it. Arthur Ford's own sons tried to fake his signature to take his cabin from his granddaughter. Some people called me smart. Some called me cold. I didn't argue with either one. My dad's business failed a few months later on its own, for reasons that had nothing to do with me. My mom went back to work. The house stayed in the family just barely. My dad and I barely spoke for a while. The quiet in that house had weight to it. One evening, Josie called me from a friend's house. "I didn't understand all of it," she said, quietly. "But I'm sorry they hurt you." "Thanks, Joe," I said, and my throat felt tight. That spring, I drove back out to the cabin. The trees along the shore were just starting to bloom. I let myself in with the same key Grandpa gave me years before. Smelled exactly the same. Pine, old paper, sun-warmed wood. In the desk drawer I found one more envelope. My name written in my grandfather's real handwriting this time. Inside was a letter. He wrote that he loved his sons, but they never understood the difference between something that has a price and something that has worth. Then came the line that broke me open. "I chose you because you asked if the roof needed fixing before you ever asked what the place was worth." At the bottom, "Take care of it. It took care of you first." I sat on that porch a long time after reading it. A week later, Nadia called with one more piece of news. My grandparents had also set aside a separate fund just for my education, quietly growing for years. It was worth more now than either the fake will or the real deed had ever fought over. That week I signed up for community college 20 minutes from the lake. For the first time I wrote the cabin's address down as my home address. Felt true. A few days after that, I asked my parents to meet me at a small coffee shop in town. Neutral ground. Not the house. Not the cabin. Somewhere calm. "I love both of you," I told them. "But the cabin isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever." My mom started to argue. I stopped her gently. "You threatened to throw me out of the house. You let Uncle Nate go through my things. You tried to pressure me into giving away the one thing Grandma trusted me to protect." My dad stared down into his coffee. "I don't know how to fix any of this," he finally said. "You don't have to fix it today," I told him and stood up. "I'll call you Sunday." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. One Sunday that May, Josie came out to the cabin with a pizza. We sat on the porch and watched the water. "I didn't know about any of it," she said quietly. "I know. Was I part of the problem?" I looked at my little sister. She hadn't asked for any of this. "You were a kid, Joe." "We both were." She looked out at the lake. "It's beautiful out here. Grandma used to say that every single time she sat on this porch." Josie smiled. "Can I come back sometimes?" "Anytime." One morning in June, I sat alone on that same porch with a cup of coffee, watching mist rise off Lantern Lake. I thought about everything that had happened. I didn't win against my family. There's no real winning when the people who were supposed to protect you try to take from you instead. But I kept my promise. And for the first time in my life, I was standing somewhere that truly belonged to me. Not because I fought the hardest. Because two people loved me enough to get ready for a storm years before I ever saw it coming. My grandparents couldn't stop my dad from getting desperate. They couldn't stop my uncle from reaching for something that was never his. But they made sure I had solid ground under my feet before either of them ever tried. Grandpa was right. There's a difference between something that has a price and something that has worth. My family spent years chasing the wrong one. If you're listening to this and you feel like nobody's protecting you, remember something. Sometimes the people who love you get ready for you quietly, long before you ever need it. And sometimes all you have to do is keep the promise they trusted you with. That's my story. If it meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to see you in the next one.